Why didn't you tell me? You told me Vader betrayed and murdered my father.
Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed. So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
The truth is often what we make of it. You heard what you wanted to hear, believed what you wanted to believe. Like philosopher John Locke said, we're born tabula rasa, or blank slates, that in time will form a perspective all our own. And that perspective will determine our truths and our beliefs, just like Obi-Wan said. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The Kybalion. The law of polarity is one of the main ways the so-called powers that be use to control those that aren't in the know in their everyday lives. This is a law that is used 24/7, 365, non-stop in order to keep the society and the general masses of people in a certain frequency or vibration that will help maintain the power structure at the top of the societal pyramid we're under. It is by far one of the most powerful laws to understand and then master. Because if you don't truly understand how this law works, you will forever be swung back and forth by the wills of other people and what the media and the powers that should not be are promoting and pushing out in society. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the law of polarity is, how to understand this law through ancient traditions like the Kabbalah and the Bible, and how we can use this law to unlock health, wealth, and more happiness in our lives. All right, so here's our beautiful structure of the Tree of Life. And if you guys are wondering what the Tree of Life is, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of what it is. It's basically a map of how the infinite or golden possibilities for all of us can manifest into finite reality. And when looking at the Tree of Life, we can see that there are two pillars supporting the outside of the structure or the tree. The pillar on the left side that's darker is called the pillar of severity, and the white pillar on the right side, that's called the pillar of mercy. We won't get too into depth with the Tree of Life in this video other than to just explain the law of polarity, but just understand that it's the blueprint for the nature of how reality works. And you can see based on the two supporting pillars of light or positivity and darkness or negativity that polarity is built right into the reality we live in. You see, we can't escape duality. It's literally built right into the fabric of reality. Left, right, in, out, good, bad, sun, moon, on, off, black, white, yes, no, male, female. It's built right into the fabric of reality. Duality is in everything. It doesn't make it negative or positive. It just is. So you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, I get that. But these seemingly opposite things are not separate at all. In fact, they're one and the same, just with the opposite polarity. So I'm going back to the Star Wars example really quickly. I know it's kind of a cheesy sci-fi movie, but like realistically, who hasn't seen Star Wars and at least liked some of it? Anyways, we're gonna talk about it because we can kind of all relate to it. Anakin and Luke were both taken under the wing by Jedi Master Obi-Wan, but one decided to use his power for selfishness, darkness, and death, while the other used his power for justice, light, and life. Two students under one teacher, yet two completely polarized outcomes. Because what's good for one person might be bad for another person. And we as humans are no different. People are polarized. You see this all the time in politics. You're either on the left side and you're liberal, or you're on the right side and you're conservative and Republican. We see this in religion. You have the extremist fundamentalist Christians versus the extremist Satanists that are wanting the NWO to come about. So how exactly is the law of polarity used by those in the know to control people? Well, a perfect example came in 2012 when Chick-fil-A president Dan Cathy said he believed that marriage should be between a man and a woman. This comment then sparked an outcry from the gay community, who boycotted and protested in chicken and cow costumes in front of every Chick-fil-A they could, which then ultimately led to another reaction of those supporting supporting the statement to buy a record number of Chick-fil-A's. You see, there was no controversy until the president of Chick-fil-A paused controversy. So who started the controversy? Chick-fil-A. Who profited from the controversy? Well, Chick-fil-A. Those that understand and use this law just have to say something and people react, because like we talked about, people are polarized. And just like in Star Wars, how the Emperor plays both sides, it doesn't matter what side you're on because they're both controlled and they're both played off against each other. This is exactly why the media focuses on issues that they create, issues that divide and polarize the people. They never focus on anything that unifies anybody. No, it's all division and polarization. The media latches on to polarizing topics and gets their 24/7 newscasters to talk about them non-stop. Right now, it's Israel versus Palestine, Russia versus Ukraine. Before it was Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. Because those who are polarized are easily manipulated and controlled. All you have to do is introduce either an alike force or an opposing force to move them. It's simply done by attraction or repulsion. Polarization is also introduced in the story of Adam and Eve. And if you're like me, you probably grew up going to Sunday school where you were actually taught that this was literal history, but for this particular video, we're going to be looking at it in terms of an allegorical story that teaches you about two very important universal principles. These two universal principles are the law of polarity and the law of gender. But for this video, we're really just going to focus on the law of polarity. We'll talk about the law of gender later on. The first thing we have to understand is that the story of Adam and Eve is about the human mind. It's about a mind that has become fractured and is therefore no longer a whole mind. In the story, God placed Adam alone in the garden. Eve had not been separated from him. So Adam was therefore whole. And this wholeness represents the conscious and the subconscious mind working in perfect unity and harmony, which is reflected by the paradise or Garden of Eden in which Adam lived. In this state of unity consciousness, Adam was one with God. As the story continues, we learn that God placed Adam in a deep sleep, or the realm of forgetfulness and fractured consciousness. And in this new state of being, Adam represents the waking conscious mind of mankind, and Eve represents the subconscious mind. As we've talked about in previous videos, when the conscious and subconscious are no longer in unity, the state of paradise or inner joy and peace can no longer be maintained, because then the ego will take control, which is what inevitably led to the fall, which is presented in the Bible as God casting out Adam and Eve from the garden. The Garden of Eden itself is also symbolic of the subconscious mind. When they ate of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, that is when duality was first introduced to humanity. And being cast out from Eden represents the solidification of that. That is when we as humanity develop the conscious side of the mind, which is what separates us from all the other animals. This is also where the ego comes from. And even though our conscious side of the mind has allowed us to make some amazing technological advances, it's also our primary source of problem. Being cast from Eden was a punishment that we had to experience. And through the experience, we gained knowledge. And so we were cast into a world of duality. Humanity is suffering from a huge bipolar disorder because as advanced and as smart as we are, we still do a ridiculous amount of foolish things. For example, nuclear power seems like a great invention until that reactor melts down. From fracking to destroying the rainforest, pollution, poisoning the ocean, the list can go on and on about humanity's impact on the environment. But such is the nature of reality. For everything good we create, there's an equal dark side to it. Just think of transportation. Cars help us get to places that would have taken days, months, or years to get to in the past. But at the same time, car accidents are one of the leading causes of accidental deaths. We've also yet to see the long-term effect of using Wi-Fi and having cell phone towers constantly beaming energy through our bodies. For as smart as we think we are, we still do some pretty dumb things. But such is the nature of polarity. You can't have a good without a bad, and you can't have something bad without something good in it. Our goal and what we talk about on this channel is ways we can effectively balance ourselves out so we can, in a sense, return to the Garden of Eden, or unity consciousness with our higher selves. It's extremely important we understand that the law of polarity in itself isn't a good or a bad thing. It's just something that is. And if you take away either the good or the bad from life in itself, as you can see from the tree of life example, the entire tree would collapse. And while at times it can be annoying when you're stuck on the wrong side of the polarity you wish you were on, it's something that we have to be grateful for and thankful for, because without it, life wouldn't exist. Think of the pillars as terminals on a battery. There's a positive and a negative. Well, what happens to the flow of electricity if you remove one of those terminals? Everything would stop. This is why you need that equal and opposite force, because without it, there can be no movement. And considering that the human body is bioelectrical and electromagnetic in nature, you can start to begin to understand how this law comes into play in our very being as humans. Unfortunately, most people in the know of this law use it to manipulate and control others. But through certain techniques, which we'll talk about in future videos, you can work on depolarizing and balancing out the energies within yourself. But for now, if you start to notice yourself being polarized in one direction or the other, just stop and realize that you have the power to control which way you polarize. So if you're being polarized towards maybe more of a negative sense, start to look for something positive in that negative situation and polarize yourself towards the positive side. And I can guarantee you, if you're looking for something positive in a negative situation, eventually, if you're really looking, you will find it. Like we talked about in the last video, you're gonna find whatever you're looking for. So stop and realize whether or not you're vibrating or looking for things that are positive and in alignment with your goal, or the majority of your thoughts are maybe going towards negative thinking patterns or things that happened in the past that you no longer have control over. And then from there, replace your negative thoughts with polar opposite thought forms or positive thought forms. For example, if you habitually think to yourself, I'm lazy, begin to tell yourself, I'm productive. And do this every time a negative thought comes into your mind with anything. Try this out for 30 days and then work your way up to 60 days, and you'll be amazed how quickly your life begins transforming into the best version of yourself.
What is a winning attitude?
Well, if we can understand, let me digress for a second. The whole universe operates by laws, and there's a law of opposites. It's called the law of polarity. Everything has its opposite. There's a right and a left side. There's a front and a back, an up and a down, a hot and a cold, positive and negative, yin the yang. You know, well, you can think negative or you can think positive, but you can't think both at the same time. You're only going to think one way at one time. And we have to train our mind to think or look for the positive or the good in things. There's good in everything. There's no such thing as no good.
Car broke down on the way over to the station.
There's something good about it. There's something good about it. Now, you may have to look to find out what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's something good in everything. There has to be a positive and a negative for anything to exist. There's a law of gender that decrees that. Science understands it. It's taught in science.
Okay.
Well, once we understand that there's this law of opposites, there's negative thoughts or positive thoughts. As the thought energy flows into our mind, we decide what we're going to think. Person's out of work. They can decide to think, I can't find a job, but they can decide to think, I can.